It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Thank you, Doug Donance. It's JD here, and I am thrilled to be back in the SNL Hall of Fame. Let me see if my key works, but before I do that, I'll wipe my feet. The SNL Hall of Fame is a weekly affair where each episode we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. And that's how we play the game. It's just that simple. But you know what? Behind the scenes, folks, it's not that simple, because we have to curate a list of who we are going to discuss every season. And we found the most fun way to achieve that is with a draft. And we're going to do that again this year. Before we explain the rules, I want to introduce the other two drafteteers. They are your friends and mine, Matt Ardill and Thomas Senna. How are you doing, fellas?
Hello, JD. Good to see you.
Hey, JD. Great, thanks.
That's a little inside baseball there, Thomas. So, Thomas, do you want to go through the intricate rules of the draft? You are the master of the draft, after all.
All right, sure thing. So this is the third season, I think, that we've done a draft and had a draft episode. So there's parameters. So the three of us, we each get 5 picks. So 15 total. We each get 5 picks. We each have to pick 2 cast members. We each have to pick 1 host. We each have to pick a musical guest or a writer. And then we have the wild card. We can do whatever the heck we want with this, as long as it's a cast member, host, musical guest, or writer. But we have the wild card there. So that adds up to 5 picks each, 15 total. And I have in my hand a coaster that I'm going to flip. I'm going to give either JD or Matt the first pick. Oh. So I want Matt to call heads or tails. Matt?
Tails.
Tails it is.
Woo!
So Matt Ardill gets the first pick. JD, you get the second pick, and I'll round things out and get the last pick. That's how the draft is working today, folks.
Okay, well, I think for my first draft pick, I am going to go with Garrett Morris. Aside from being an original cast member, he's a Juilliard trained performer. He can sing, dance, act, the entire 9 yards. He was just has incredible chops, amazing sketches or bits like the White Guilt Relief Fund, impressions of Chubby Checker that he did with Carrie Fisher, first appearance of a Marvel character as Ant-Man.
That's right.
And I watched this one interview where he was talking about Death Row Follies. And it was really interesting because he was talking about how he was with Harry Belafonte's band and they were just chatting. And he's like, so the entire process was Lorne just had an idea for a sketch and sent them off to write. He didn't give him any direction. It's like, you're on death row, you're performing. And he went back to this memory. And he's talking about how the core of improv is drawing from your experiences. He went back to this memory of talking to Harry Belafonte, band member, who had watched an old 1950s TV show. And if you remember the sketch, his bit is, I'm going to get me a shotgun and kill all the whitest I see. And he's like, well, that actually originated from this old 1950s, this is your life type of show. where this woman had written over 300 songs, and they brought her up from the audience and sat her down to interview her. And that's kind of how the song went. But she was a white woman from the South. And so you can imagine how that was. So he took it and flipped it and used that for comedy. And it's just like, it just brought so much to the table. And I feel like out of the original cast, he's one of those people who just is not given as much respect or acknowledgement as he's due. And I think it's his time to shine.
JD, so this is Garrett's one of the last remaining original cast members that we have yet to discuss. This is exciting. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm excited that we're kicking it off with an old school, an original 7. Is it 7? Right, it was 7. And
do we count
I
George Coe and Michael O'Donoghue?
Oh no, I'm not the core. I'm talking about the core. It's almost the same as the NHL, where they have the original 6, but there was eras before it that had 8 teams. And but whatever. I digress. I think it's a great pick. I think it's an exciting pick for a show like ours. I know that he will be a tentpole rather. In terms of episodes, you've probably noticed in the past that we front stack and back stack with more high profile performers or nominees, and Garrett Morris will certainly be one of those. That being said, I don't see him as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Lorraine Newman didn't make it in on the first ballot, and I can't imagine him doing better than Lorraine Newman, because I think, based on a time and place, he was critically misused.
Yes.
He was the epitome of, the South Park gag, the token, right? Like, it almost smacks you in the face because you don't see him ever. And then when you do see him, it's like there's flashes of brilliance, like you were mentioning, Matt. So I anticipate him going in, but not as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, there's not as much meat on the bone as far as his resume as a lot of cast members, but not necessarily his fault, which I'll be interested to see if the voters may take that into account or anything. But definitely, a beloved original cast member. I think this is an interesting choice that makes sense for an episode for us.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to start with somebody who just really epitomizes my experience with SNL in the last 12 years, I would say. I started watching this performer and I didn't like him that much unless he was with this other guy. And then I started to like them as a duo. And then I really saw that this next nominee was outshining not only his comedic partner, but several other male cast members. And I'm talking about Beck Bennett, who just recently became eligible for the Hall of Fame. So that may hurt his chances of getting in right away. But I think he's versatile. I think he's the kind of guy, and I know we overuse this statement, but you ask him to do anything and he'll do it. Like he doesn't know an impression. You know what? He'll put it together in a week. It's like that old school mentality. Yeah, I don't know how to do a Putin impression. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll take off my shirt. And sound vaguely Russian, But it was one of my favorite reoccurring characters. And I think one of the last sketches he did, I might be wrong, but it's a solo sketch with him as Vin Diesel.
Yep, that was his last. That was the last sketch of the season
of the night,
finale.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The Anya Taylor-Joy episode. Yeah,
that's right. I just got such a kick out. I got such a kick out of it. So it was like, I sound so old when I say that, but I am. So there you go. By the time you're hearing this, I'm 50. I'm 50. So that's my pick. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I think that's an awesome pick. I've always felt he's one of those performers that really grew on me. The longer longer he was on screen, the more I saw him, and I think that's a terrific choice. Also, he's in DuckTales, so I can't fault him there. Like talented man of many talents. So,
if you ever want to hear a fantastic episode of, it's a great podcast. It's a stand-up comedian that hosts it. There, I'm narrowing it down substantially, aren't I? And it's got, he used to be in the HBO show called Crashing.
Oh, Pete Holmes.
Pete Holmes, yes. He has a podcast, and he interviews Beck Bennett on an episode. Sorry, folks, for that previous ramble. That was very riveting podcasting, I know. But at any rate, he is featured on this episode of the podcast, and it's a long form interview. It's like a 3-hour interview, but they get into it. And he was a multi-millionaire when he signed to go work at Saturday Night Live on the basis of those insurance company commercials he was doing with the kids.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you ever saw that campaign, but it was a national campaign in the US, and he booked it, and it became a reoccurring thing. And by the time, it reoccurred for the 5th time, they signed him for 6 figures to do it.
Oh, jeez.
And Pete Holmes pulls that out of him. Like, afterwards, he's so mortified because Pete Holmes he's like, what'd you get? Like 50K? He's like, no. He's like, 200K? He's like, oh, I don't really want to talk about it. He's like, 750K? It's like, okay, it was $1 million.
Yeah.
I digress.
That's where I first saw him.
On the insurance commercials?
Yeah. It was there were telephone commercials.
Telephone commercials.
Yeah,
okay.
he had a group of kids, and he was almost like the moderator and asked kids questions or whatever. And so when he got hired to SNL, I was like, oh, that's the guy from the commercials. so I had already known his face, and now I'm like, I didn't know he did comedy, and he's on SNL now. That's going to be interesting. And he turned into like a steady hand. He turned into like basically like almost the Rock of the show. Like he and Keenan were almost like the steady hand rocks of that era of SNL. I'm excited about talking about Beck.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great episode, I suspect.
Who do you have for us?
Yeah,
that's right.
So I want to go a different route. I'm gonna use my musical guest early. And probably in a lot of ways because I think I already have a guest booked for this. One of my favorite guests to bring on the SNL Hall of Fame to talk music. So I'm going to pick U2 as a nominee. And with the understanding that musical guests haven't had such great luck here on the SNL Hall of Fame, I think Paul Simon is in, and that's about it. I think I'm going to keep banging this drum all season. Dave Grohl should be in. And I will be talking about that as much as I can. This is Dave Grohl's final season on the ballot. But I digress. U2, amazing band, some memorable appearances at SNL 4 times on the show. And I think I have an awesome guest lined up to talk about U2. So I'm going to take U2 off the board early as my musical guest.
They would have been one of my picks tonight, I suspect. They were on my musical short list if I didn't pick a writer. So they could have ended up a wild card for me. That being said, when did their appearances start? Were they always like a superstar band?
Well,
on the show?
Thing. Yeah, no, they I don't think they appeared until the 90s. So that's
like Upton Baby.
Yeah, that's one of the things about them. From my recollection, I think they did pop, but they just did they didn't appear when the Joshua Tree came out.
Right.
They kind of missed like that. So I think their first appearances were in the 90s. So that'll be discussed, I'm sure, on our show as far as like timing of their appearances. To me, it reminds me maybe a little bit of Prince in some ways, as far as timing of their appearances.
For me, they appeared after I'd already burnt out on them. Like I was that Joshua Tree era fan and really wasn't that Zooropa, kind of era didn't really click for me. But I do know a lot of people of my age who were completely over the moon when they were on SNL. So yeah, I mean, they're a great band. No arguments there, but I don't know. It's just, for me, they aren't as as memorable, but I can understand why, because they are still such an amazing band, and they did really put it all on the table whenever they did perform.
I just think, for me, the fact that the first time they showed up on SNL, if they were touring Achtung Baby, then it was either the Zoo TV tour, which was a stadium tour, or it was the one that had the cars hanging from the arena. I forget what that part of the tour was called before they went into Zoo TV and stadiums. So you have this band that's playing stadiums around the world coming into 8H. This little wee stage.
Right.
That's what I mean. That's frickin' Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the fascinating things about SNL and musical guests is we sometimes take for granted, like, you know, Lady Gaga or Taylor Swift or somebody like that. Like we're seeing these acts in a like more intimate setting instead of these stadiums. U2 definitely qualifies. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, so that's my pick. We have Garrett Morris, Beck Bennett, and U2. It's back to Matt.
I'm going to go with my host card next. I am going to nominate Adam Driver. Again, one of those really strong players. He really brings his heart to every performance. And he'll do things that, like, I'm pretty sure other people of his caliber of stardom would really push back on. I mean, you look at that cold open sketch where he was Epstein and John Lovitz was Alan Dershowitz during the impeachment trial. The dark gallows humor that he was willing to go to in that for that sketch. But then you also see like really over the top silly things like when he was playing Dr. Rockhard, the porn doctor. And it's just, he's willing to, like, you know, he's another one of those performers like John Hamm. Like his stardom doesn't get in the way of him doing silly stuff that takes down his own myth. Like even like the undercover boss is Kylo Ren. So I'm going with Adam Driver.
Great pick. I think Adam Driver, he wasn't on my short list, but I think it's a fantastic pick because he doesn't have a dud. He doesn't have a dud episode. And that's key to being a Hall of Fame host, in my opinion. I tend to lean toward the 5-timer being, you know, sort of a cutoff for me, and he just misses that. But man, I can't wait to see those other performances working with this group that is starting to really find itself.
Yeah, this Adam Driver is he's one of the better hosts of this whole era of SNL. And Matt, you did me a favor because Adam Driver was on like a short list and I was going to be debating between should I pick Driver or these other people. So you just made that decision easier for me by taking Adam Driver because he was definitely on my like very short list of hosts that I was considering. He's just a guy who's not necessarily, he did some comedic stuff in Girls. He had some comedic moments, but I wouldn't describe him as a comedian or like a comedic actor, but he showed those chops on SNL. And I think that's a lot of times that's what happens. A lot of those good actors tend to do really well as SNL hosts because they can just slide in and just do really quality sketch work. And he was definitely up for anything. And I love this. I'm super pumped to talk about Adam Driver.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. Anyone in mind off the top of your head?
Not at all. I'll put the fillers out there. I'll get somebody good. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, that's great. All right. I'm up next. And I'm going to go with an old favorite. To me, the first season of SNL that my little peepers got to see was Lauren's first year back. I saw the back half of that season and was blown away. I had seen some Eddie Murphy episodes prior to that, but not much, and I don't have memories of them. But that season I have memories, and I have memories of one particular actor. And it's not Dennis Miller, who I thought was the coolest dude of all time, but the guy that made me laugh the most consistently, because he was hammy, but not in a hammy way. And it's John Lovitz who I'm talking about. I think he's got a terrific resume. He was one of the very few Nora Dunn, Dennis Miller, and he were the only survivors of the massacre that ensued following that season that Lorne came back. And they carried over into what became the second golden era of Saturday Night Live. In many ways, they formed, the foundation of the next 20 years of that show. You had with the Weekend Update, you had the solo performer doing Weekend Update. You had this character actor that would do fantastic characters all the time. And again, I'm talking Lovitz. Just really terrific stuff. I'm really excited to see who you line up to talk about Jon Lovitz. I'm sure there'll be quite a few people who want to do that, but I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, people are going to be chomping at the bit to talk about this, and I know off the top of my head at least couple SNL podcasters out there would love, maybe have already talked to me about, hey, if you guys do Jon Lovitz, let me know. That would be one that I'd be interested. So I know I'll have no shortage of options for Jon Lovitz. This is such a good one too. It's funny, Jamie, I'm keeping track of this. I'm typing as we go along. And as soon as you started saying this person stood out to me at the end of Lorne's first season, I wrote Jon Lovitz. I'm like, oh, Jamie's talking about Jon Lovitz. And I'm just really excited and you did me a favor too, just like Matt did me a favor with Adam Driver. Jon Lovitz was on like my very short list. Like I was saying to myself, am I really going to go another draft without picking Jon Lovitz? We have to have Jon Lovitz on this season. So I'm so excited about this, Jamie.
Oh. Great minds. He was on my list as well. Honestly, I mean, like Tommy Flanagan, The Devil in the People's Court, just these consistently hilarious. And I mean, at the time when I was a kid, I didn't get him as much, but going back and rewatching him, it's like, I get it now. I get why everybody loved him. And I just think my tastes were not refined enough to appreciate him at the time. But I having gone back and rewatched his era, I watched it on TV at the time too. He's just a freaking genius. He knows when to go big. He knows when to be small, and he'll do completely bonkers characters.
And right now, he's adopted this, I say right now, but over the last 25 years, he's adopted this butt of the all jokes, SNL based. And I think that's hilarious. Like when they did the In Memoriam, and he was on there. There's been other instances as well. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jon Lovitz. Awesome. So we're back to me. I'm going to pick a cast member. I'm going to utilize one of my cast member choices. And we've talked about Molly Shannon. Congratulations, Molly, on being an SNL Hall of Famer. We've talked Anna Gasteyer. So I'm going to go with a very talented woman who was their cohort, who often upstaged them and who maybe popped even more so than the other two, which is saying a lot. We haven't heard a ton from her since SNL, but I still think Sherry O'Terry should get some love and get an episode of her own.
Wow.
So I want to choose Sherry O'Terry as my choice. We're going to have a Sherry O'Terry episode. And I think it's well-deserved. I think she was a really big part of the resurgence of SNL back in the late 90s.
Oh, totally agree. Like, she was just like an amazing workhorse, great impersonations and impressions. And just a terrific energy. I mean, she was in a cast with some really amazing people, but she always, she could hold her own, with the rest of the cast. And her Barbara Walters is like, when I imagine Barbara Walters, I actually imagine her impression more than I imagine actually Barbara Walters. And it's like, that just speaks to how much of a stamp she put on her performances.
Yeah, I think in particular, her work with Will Ferrell was spectacular. They found each other in scenes together quite often, and she could keep up with him physically and, turn a phrase in a character type way. Really terrific stuff. I can't wait.
We've talked about a lot of the people from that era, and they're always really fun conversations because a lot of listeners, some of my guests, that's like their prime SNL years. It was like the Will Ferrell, Molly Shannon, Anna Gasteyer. We've talked Chris Parnell. We've talked Daryl Hammond. So I think it's about time Sherry O'Terry gets her episode. So I'm glad you guys are excited about this one.
Well, I guess it's my turn again. I am going to go to the writer's pool for this one. Going to plumb my Gen X credentials and choose one of my favorite sketch performers, writers, and later dramatic actors, Bob Odenkirk. He's, probably in a lot of ways coming out of the writer's room. A lot of the writers do very successfully afterwards, but they're not necessarily as high profile. Whereas in a lot of ways, he's probably one of the most high profile former writer of the show as an actor, like with Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. But he's writing with Robert Smigel and Conan O'Brien. But came out of the Chicago Second City community, and created characters like the Chris Farley's inspirational speaker Matt Foley, and he went on to become like a very big voice in Gen X comedy with Mr. Show, and working with Ben Stiller and Chris Elliott, and writing for Dennis Miller when he had his own show. I'm just a big fan of Bob Odenkirk, and I'd love to see him inducted.
Yeah, I wonder, our buddies at the Saturday Night Network are definitely great as far as helping us out with credits and stuff. So I'm curious, there's probably going to be some Odenkirk stuff that I didn't know that he was behind, that I'll find out through this. That tends to happen when I start researching the writers and doing all of that. So I'm excited to find out a lot of what I don't know about Bob's SNL tenure. Obviously, I think he might get a little bit of a bump too because of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and he's still relevant now. So I think we might see what I'll call the Conan O'Brien bump. Maybe not to that level, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a surge for him. But I'm excited to see just what I don't know about Odenkirk.
Yeah, and it's very little that I didn't. I forgot completely about the motivational speaker Matt Foley being a brainchild of his, but I've watched the Second City version of it, and it's really great. I think you are going to find somebody that's going to make a fantastic case for Bob Odenkirk. I would have difficulty being the person to do that because I am not good at research, and it's a blind spot for me. So I think that is something that I'm trying to wrap my head around a little bit when I think about him as a Hall of Famer. I look at the other writers who are in the Hall. You get Seth Meyers, you get Conan O'Brien. Yeah, Conan O'Brien is this outlier. I can't wait to listen to the episode. So, I want to be swayed.
Yeah, hopefully it's a good one for you all. I'm sure it will be. I'm looking forward to see who takes on the assignment of being my guest for the Odenkirk episode.
I'm going to go with hosts next. And it's someone who breaks my rule that I already outlined, 300 strikeouts or 500 home runs to get into the Hall of Fame. And that's 5 stints as a host. This gentleman only has 4.
That's good, Jamie. I was going to talk you out of that anyway. So you shouldn't be so beholden to that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So I think I remember a party years ago. I was still at an age, it was season 19, and I was of an age where I had to watch Saturday Night Live like every week, did not miss it. And there was this big house party, and I put it on and sat down on the couch to watch SNL. And I remember it vividly because it was Nirvana hosting. Nirvana was the musical guest, and it was my next nominee's first time hosting the show. And that was all the way back in 1993, I believe. And this is Charles Barkley.
Yeah, and he's very relevant nowadays because he claims he's retiring from TV. We're recording this a little ahead of time until it comes out. He says he's retiring from TV because TNT isn't going to have basketball rights. They don't know what's going to go on with Inside the NBA. I don't know if I quite believe him. Honestly, one of the most entertaining people in sports television, always entertaining when he hosts SNL. Just a really charismatic dude, just really funny guy. So I like this.
I have to say, I think that's a great choice because, I mean, he's one of those few. I'm not a big fan of sports personalities on the show. And he's one of the few I felt, because, I mean, I still remember, like, we're months apart in age. So I was watching that same night. And I had my shaggy shoulder length, greasy hair and grubby beard and my flannels. So I was right into Nirvana at that time. And yeah, it was a surprising performance for me. I didn't to do as well and be as strong as he was, but it was a great showing.
I think one of the other, sort of not rules, but little guidelines I like to look at for a host is how many eras did they work in? And he also qualifies there for me. His first appearance was again in season 19, and it was 1993. Then we didn't get him again until 2010 in season 35. Then he showed up relatively quickly with Kelly Clarkson in 2012 on season 37. But then he wasn't back till season 43 in 2018. So that would have been almost an entire turnover at that point. I think, to me, that somebody that can host that many good episodes, I think season over season, era over era, is somebody that should be at least considered for the Hall of Fame. Do I think he's a first ballot? No. But I think, to use the parlance of his former sport, he's a slam dunk at some point.
Oh, very nice, JD. It's like a mic drop on your Charles Barkley pick. I like it. So Charles Barkley is a host. I'm gonna pick a host as well. You guys, I have a musical guest. I picked a cast member. I'm gonna go with the host, somebody who's been very important to SNL, a former cast member, but I don't think she quite has the resume to talk about as a cast member, but I think she has some underrated episodes. Definitely, when I went back and looked at her work as a host, it surprised me as far as how strong she was as a host. And maybe it shouldn't, because she was a cast member. She's hilarious. I'm talking about Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which does break your rule, Jamie, about she's only a 3-timer. But she's worked with at least 2 different eras. She hosted in 2006, 2007, and she hosted in 2016. So she's worked with at least 2 different eras. But she always just she was a steady hand as a host. She did a great job. To me, this is a chance to celebrate Julia just all around as well. And I think that's what this show, SNL Hall of Fame, is about, is a chance to celebrate these folks. And so I'm excited to celebrate just a super talented woman who has had an impact on SNL. Maybe, I think, more so maybe as a host than as a cast member, but it'll be fun just to talk about her, maybe touch on her entire body of work. Just a great comedic actor. I love Julia Louis-Dreyfus, so I want to talk about her.
For me, it feels when she came back to host, it was very much like a returning champion. Like she came back and she'd conquered, and she was able to relish in that glory. and it was like, I remember watching her in her era on the show and coming back and seeing her, and she's just so much more confident in every scene, and so much more, like, she was great originally, but you see this growth in her, and it was great to see her at the peak of her ability coming back to the show.
What I think is fascinating is, I don't know off the top of my head if there is another host Hall of Famer that was a former cast member. And I don't think there is.
I don't think so. I think this might be the first. Yeah.
I think that that's a fascinating aspect of this candidacy. That here she is, somebody that has 3 years on the show under her belt, and she gets called in, she knows what she's doing, not only comedically and as a comedic actress, but as a former cast member. She sort of knows the ropes, and that is terrific fodder for conversation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two cast members in the SNL Hall of Fame that I think have cases to be in the SNL Hall of Fame as hosts. And I think Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig probably have cases for both things, which is pretty impressive. If we're talking former cast members as hosts, the two of the preeminent ones are already in the hall. I think Julia is a good next level as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Well, how do you follow Julia Louis-Dreyfus? So I think I'm going to go with another cast member. And I was speaking about Dr. Rockhard earlier, and I'm going to go back to his waiting room and show in Aidy Bryant, who is just another one of those incredible talents, solid delivery, 10-year veteran on the show. Just, her musical bits, and on top of that, possibly the best Ted Cruz impersonation that I have ever seen. Yeah, and I mean, she got her start as a producer for Comedy Bang Bang, and she just brought that willingness and energy that you get in that LA alt comedy scene to SNL, and I thought it was a great addition.
I did not know that's where she came from. That's amazing. The former TV show or the podcast?
The TV show.
Oh, so cool. Wow. Yeah, I think this is another great pick, Matt. Aidy Bryant is a spectacular cast member. And again, she was alongside Kate McKinnon, and Kate McKinnon was Gilda Radner, was Jan Hooks, was Kristen Wiig, begat Kate McKinnon, and yet Aidy stood beside her and could shine brighter. And that, to me, not all the time, but from time to time, for sure. And that, to me, is a great place to start your argument for why she belongs in the hall.
Yeah, so beloved. I'm curious to see what the voting percentage will be like from her. If we're reading the tea leaves with Kate McKinnon, it probably won't go in Aidy's favor the first time, but she's definitely, to me, she's hall worthy. I'll say that, and she's definitely episode worthy. This is something when Aidy stepped away from the show, this was something that I was excited. Like, I know in a couple of years, in a few seasons or whatever, we're going to be able to do an Aidy Bryant episode. So this is something I've been looking forward to ever since she left the show, Matt. So this is awesome. The research is going to be fun. I know I'm going to have a great guest. There's people going to be lining up to talk about Aidy Bryant. She's just such a beloved figure on SNL, and I think we're seeing kind of hard to replace, honestly.
Yeah. All right, so I'm up to bat. I'm going to close my eyes and point. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in order. I'm going to stay in order. I did 2 cast members. I did a host. Now I'm going to do a musical guest / writer, but I'm going to choose a musical guest who was a fantastic songwriter, quite frankly. One of the best songwriters and most well-known songwriters in his generation, which was predominantly the 70s, although adult contemporary played him throughout the 80s, and he made his presence known on SNL, I believe, in 80, 83, and then 86. He was on the Ebersol era, he was on the original Lorne era, and then Lorne brought him back for that first season. I'm talking about, if you don't know, Randy Newman, who is not my bag necessarily, but I recognize the brilliance in his songwriting and his ability to inflect his sense of humor. He's got a wicked sense of humor, and he uses that in his music in a really fun kind of way. The only contemporary artist I can think of that reminds me of something similar is like Ben Folds. But Ben Folds, certainly wasn't ever as big as Randy Newman was. or is. Although I do love Ben Folds. Anyway, I think that's my pick, Randy Newman, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, 6-timer Randy Newman.
6-timer. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So he had quite an impact on the show. I already have maybe somebody in mind as a guest for Randy Newman. So I think that not totally like 100% my cup of tea. There's a lot of stuff that he did that I did like, but maybe an era before me. But you can't argue his impact as a songwriter. Just what a reliable guest that he was on SNL. So I think this is a really great choice. We're celebrating an older era of SNL that deserves to be celebrated with one of the predominant musical guests from that era. I like it, Jamie.
Same here. I mean, like, he's one of those performers that, especially in that early era, SNL tapped into the zeitgeist musically in a way that was seldom seen on television. Like, you wouldn't see him on a lot of TV shows other than these shows like SNL pushing the edges of musical talent and bringing in voices that were not necessarily always paid attention to. But I mean, he's gone on to become like this cultural touchstone, like the Toy Story theme songs, like he's like all sorts of movies and television shows that he's touched. And I think that a lot of that comes back to these 6 episodes that he did that helped elevate him. So this will be a great conversation.
Good job, Jamie. I love it. So, and another musical guest. And we can see how musical guests of different eras kind of do. I'm always fascinated.
Yeah. I don't have high hopes.
Yeah.
But I do.
No, it's
I
the
do
journey.
think. Sorry?
I said it's the journey. That's what I think. That's what's important here. It's the journey, not like if he makes it or not. I mean, that's obviously.
You got it.
What's that?
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's important, but, I've learned my lesson with Dave Grohl, and I just had to appreciate doing the Dave Grohl episode, and whether he gets into the hall, that's I almost have to take that as like a bonus. So
Yeah.
I'm up next, and I have another cast member that I need to, so I picked Sherry O'Terry as my first cast member, and I'm going to go a little more current than Sherry O'Terry and talk about Bobby Moynihan. I think Bobby's had such a huge impact on SNL, and he never was somebody who was looked at as the leader of any of his casts, but he was so important, and I think he was always such a underrated cast member until he left the show, and then people started reevaluating his time at SNL and were like, man, yeah, yes. Right? Yeah, people were like, wasn't Bobby Moynihan so good? And then we start thinking of all these characters, all his sketch work. He still loves SNL. He still appears on it. He's an SNL podcast listener. I'm about 5% convinced that he might listen to the SNL Hall of Fame. That's how much he loves SNL. So Bobby Moynihan, if you're out there, we love you, and we're going to do an episode on you.
For me, he was like, when he popped, for me, he just, like, there's the one sketch, and I liked him, but it's sort of on the fence. But my wife was like, I don't. He's not. But then he did the Peppa Up in Here character, and we're just like, we're in love. We're in love with Bobby. He's just so brilliant, and I can't wait to hear this episode.
I think you really hit it on the head when you were talking about his departure and reflecting back. And seeing that Bobby Moynihan shaped hole, I think that I think that his versatility is something that isn't discussed enough. He was great in sketches. He was great at being a character, and he did Weekend Update bits out the yin yang that were almost all home runs. If that's not Hall of Fame worthy, I don't know what is. What I am going to be interested to see is the 2 current big boys so far are Beck Bennett and Bobby Moynihan. Those are, sort of current era level Hall of Fame nominees. I'm curious which one will get more ballots this year. I don't think either goes in this year, but
do a little side bet.
But I'm curious who gets the most ballots. Yeah. Maybe we can get a sponsorship from one of the online
Exactly.
casinos.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm glad you guys like this pick. Bobby Moynihan, super excited to start delving into all his work. I mean, I know a lot of it's imprinted in my mind, but it's just so fun to go back and watch him cook. Like the Weekend Update desk is something that he just lived in and made his own. Riblet and Drunk Uncle, like there's just like things that are so classic.
Oh yeah.
We still go back to Drunk Uncle. Like, just everyone's always like, yeah, this is a Drunk Uncle moment.
Yeah.
It's just so perfect.
Definitely. Yeah. So Bobby Moynihan, Matt, circling back around. So we're down to the home stretch. It's the final pick for all three of us. So
I am going to go back to the beginning. Alan Zweibel, one of the original Band of Writers, pen for that first season of SNL. He went on to... He had a really close relationship with Gilda Radner, writing a memoir about the relationship Bunny, Gilda Radner, A Sort of Love Story, which was adopted into a play. Wrote for Gary Shandling, Curb Your Enthusiasm. But also he created, I'd say, two of the most iconic sketches of that original era, which are Belushi's Samurai sketch and Rosanna Dana. I feel like those are two of those early characters that really you think back to them as like they just pop, and they're both from his pen. So that is my final pick.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. Alan Zweibel, they talk about him being under the Weekend Update desk, handing off jokes. He was a joke writer. That's what he was. He was a joke writer, and he was among the last people to be hired, I think. But they knew what they needed, and they knew that he could deliver, and deliver he did. Bonding early on with Gilda Radner, using that bond to create an iconic character, co-create an iconic character. Like you say, that may have overstayed her welcome, but she was on quite a bit those first couple seasons.
It's just a fact.
But nevertheless, she was great, and he's great. And I think that the people that listen to this show need to start understanding that this is a show that has performers that do great work and are coming from a school of improvisation. But virtually everything you see every week on Saturday Night Live is written, and it's written by really talented people, and they need to be reflected in the hall as well.
Well said. Hear, hear. And as Zweibel, when I go back and watch old SNL episodes, he makes me do the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme, because he will appear. Like, you'll see a sketch and then you'll be like, oh, there's Alan Zweibel in the background, or they used a picture of Alan Zweibel on Weekend Update for something, or he'll just kind of pop up. He's like Where's Waldo in that era. Zweibel will pop up when you least expect him. And he had a really funny cameo in Curb Your Enthusiasm as well. He had a funny interaction with Larry David when he ran into him in New York City at a bar. That one of my favorite scenes in the show's history, Zweibel was a part of. So we love him.
Wow. Oh, this is going to be a fun one to listen to.
Yeah.
I've got a lot to learn. And that is where I start with my wild card pick. I've got a lot to learn. I don't know a lot about this next fella. I know not a lot about him because of the era he came into, but I know that he was part of the bread and butter. There was Eddie Murphy carrying the load, but the glue guy was Joe Piscopo.
I felt you were going there.
And Joe Piscopo is somebody that I think, while he's got some interesting things to say these days, I think that reflecting back on his actual career, which is what we want to do and we want to look at, I think that he was pivotal. He was pivotal. There are a handful of people that are responsible for SNL, staying afloat. I'm not going to say keeping it alive in this case, because I don't think he was that valuable a cog overall, but he kept it afloat for sure. Like, he was somebody who kept it afloat. He was he was a steady rower. And it was a time that things were not steady, other than Steady Eddie, of course. So Joe Piscopo has got my pick.
He's probably the most buff former cast member in the show's history. If I mean, I haven't done the proper research for this, but my guess is he's the most ripped cast member in history. What do you guys think?
I have to agree.
Beck Bennett is surprisingly close, but I think Joe in his heyday has that title.
I think he's the only one who's appeared on a Men's Health magazine. That's for sure.
Probably. Never saw Kyle Mooney in Men's Health.
Now I got that sketch in my head where he got wearing the bodysuit, like,
yeah, that's what Joe Piscopo actually looked like at one point.
Yeah. Let's write a sketch about Joe Piscopo.
Yeah, Jamie, this is great. I think people always talk about Eddie Murphy, rightfully so. Like Eddie Murphy was amazing in that era, but Joe Piscopo was right there with him in a lot of these classic sketches. Yeah. And I know a lot of SNL super fans who really go to bat for talking about how important Joe Piscopo was and what an actual like good cast member he was. So this will be really neat to go back and watch. Frankly, a lot of sketches that sort of get lost in time from era. If Eddie Murphy wasn't a part of them, it's almost like they just kind of get lost in SNL history. So this will be a fun one for me.
And when you find them out there, they're usually hacked to bits.
Right.
Like there's like 3 sketches and one musical performance or something like that, you know?
Exactly.
What have you got for us, Thomas? Oh, sorry, Matt.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I can't wait as well. Like, I mean, he's such I love his mobster characters when he goes into that sort of like rat pack channeling, like Frank Sinatra that he would often do.
Yeah.
And they use that like later on in his career, he appeared on Star Trek, The Next Generation as like a rat pack era comedian. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, like he mentored Data on how to be a stand-up comedian, and it's just like he exudes the feel of that era. But that's because he just is so good at committing to a bit. So yeah, I can't wait.
Thomas, you're bringing us home.
Yes, sir. I'm rounding this out. I have a wild card pick as well, and I'm going to add another host into the mix. I'm going to end it with a host, and it's a 5-timer. So I'm adhering to that loose rule, I guess, of having a 5-timer. It's somebody who actually hosted 6 times between 1982 and 1999. Bobby Moynihan apparently actually impersonated this person on the show one time. So I'm talking about Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito, I was going to guess that.
Yeah,
wow.
So it's Danny DeVito. He was always like a very reliable host. He hosted one time with his wife, Rhea Perlman.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I remember him having memorable sketches, really funny. Everybody talks about the Delicious Dish with Alec Baldwin, but Danny DeVito was in a really clever Delicious Dish sketch in his own right that I'll definitely talk about. I always loved Danny. He's such a interesting, quirky personality. And it's just going to be so fun to chat about his hosting gigs at SNL. Like I said, 82 to 99. So not quite like he never hosted with a lot of the new cast, but he got to see a lot of SNL. Danny DeVito is my choice.
I like it. It's a bold choice. It's sort of sitting in the bushes, you know, but it's very obvious once you play those cards. And the fact that the run is from 82 to 99 and you got a lot of quality appearances, you know, again, another stat, quality appearances. They, together with Rhea Perlman, I thought was a fun episode. And for a time, it almost seemed like he was going to challenge Alec Baldwin. He even had the episode with his spouse. You know, they were rolling out around the same episodes, and then Baldwin just took off in a bolt. I think that Danny DeVito is somebody that will, you know, probably hit around the 35% mark in his first year, which to me is somebody that's likely to get in, but it'll take a couple years of us pestering people and telling people, no, watch the episodes. This guy was really good.
And Danny DeVito is one of those interesting. I remember watching Taxi as a kid, and he was just like so abrasive. But it was, again, it comes back to his capability of understanding the moment and what he needed to bring to any scene. And then, you go on and watch him in like Twins and like all of this stuff growing up. I actually don't remember his SNL days. Yeah. So I'm going to have to go back and rewatch those episodes.
A lot of quirky sketches. It's very, a lot of them are very Danny DeVito.
Which is a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. I think It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is going to help him too, because a lot of younger...
Right, he's very relevant.
Yeah, a lot of younger people like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I like it. My 16-year-old niece loves it. So that's, he a lot of people from different generations know Danny DeVito, and I think It's Always Sunny is going to help him a lot here.
I wonder if he'll come back. I wonder if he'll do a stint again.
Yeah, when I was looking at hosts,
if that show ends or something.
I think he'd be game. He's really game for anything. Like, he's not a person to turn down an opportunity to perform. So I would say he'd go for it.
Wow. Maybe we can hire him for the SNL Hall of Fame Christmas party this year.
Oh, I'll put some fillers out.
Yeah.
I'm efforting, as we say in the business.
Well, Thomas, do you want to run down our picks one more time?
Absolutely. So in order of whether they're drafted, we have Garrett Morris, Beck Bennett, U2, Adam Driver, John Lovitz, Sherry O'Terry, Bob Odenkirk, Charles Barkley, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, A.D. Bryant, Randy Newman, Bobby Moynihan, Alan Zweibel, Joe Piscopo, and Danny DeVito. I spared you guys my Don Pardo impression when I was going through that, by the way, so you're welcome.
Listen, I think that's a formidable class of nominees, rather, not inductees, but nominees. I think that we've got an interesting season at our hands. On top of those 15 episodes, of course, we're going to do another Don Pardo Award. There will be, of course, our famous roundtable episode, and then we'll wrap it all up with the class of season 6. I wonder who on the ballot will make it. It'll be interesting to see. Thomas, Matt, thanks so much. This was a blast.
That was great.
Well, that's what we've got for you. So if you do me a favor, and on the way out, as you pass the weekend update exhibit, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNL HOF. This is Doug Donance saying, see you next week.
Do podcasts and such.